Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to be pollarding these willows here. These are hybrid willows, often grown for biomass. People often grow them on field scale, get industrial harvesters, harvest them for biomass, which can be used for making renewable energy. They're also quite good for just making wood chips, and they're not too bad for burning. Not the best wood for burning, but not too bad. These ones are probably only about 3 or 4 years old. They were planted just as hardwood cuttings. The great thing about willow is you can just cut any old stick off in winter, stick it in the ground. As long as the ground is damp, it will root and take and grow into a new tree quite quickly and easily. So these were all planted, as I say, about 4 years ago probably. Last year was the first year we pollarded them, and it was incredible to see how much they actually grew. So with these willows, they're interesting plants, these hybrid willows. They don't actually grow that tall in the wild. The height they are now is almost the full height they get to be honest. They only grow to about 6 or 8 meters tall, but they grow really fast up to that height, and then they just kind of sit there and don't grow anymore. But then if you keep pollarding them, each year they'll grow really fast, and you can get up to 4 or 5 meters of growth in 1 year. So this here is probably the tallest ones. I'm going to measure them once I cut them down and see how much they've grown, but it looks to me about 4 meters, possibly more, but I don't really know until I get the measuring tape out. So the first few years we just let them grow tall. If you're growing willow for pollarding, it's good to let the roots establish before you give them a hard prune. So you can see here, this is where they were cut off last year, and then it's got all these new shoots coming up. And this shoot here, this time last year, sprouted here, or actually even later, it would have been a few months later in spring, it sprouted, and it's grown about 4 meters in that one growing season. You can tell it's one growing season because there's not any branches on it, it's just one straight stem. It did grow one little side stem at the end of the season, but generally they don't grow any side stems in the first year. Second year, this would grow side stems. So what you can do is when you're pollarding these, you can do them in a 1, 2 or 3 year pollard kind of regime. We're doing a 1 year one here because we don't need really thick stems. With 1 year you'll get stems probably about this thickness, up to 1 inch across, but then tapering quite a lot as it goes up. If we left this for 1 more year, this whole branch, instead of getting taller, what it would do, it would have loads of side branches coming out. You can see the buds here where the side branches would come out from. It's covered in buds. Lots of side branches would come up, and then the plant would thicken up this stem, and you'd get a stem probably near enough this kind of thickness here, quite a solid stem with lots of side branches. So if you want thicker stems you can do that, but it won't really get much taller. As I say, these hybrid willows, they tend to grow really fast once they've been pollarded, and then they just kind of thicken up after that. They don't really get much taller. So I'll be cutting these back. It was the first year these were pollarded, so they've actually sprouted from lower down as well as from higher up. If you are pollarding them at home, you want to choose what height you want them to be pollarded to. A coppice is basically when you take it right down to the ground. A pollard is when it's higher up on the stem that you're cutting it back off to. Now, for ease of use, a pollard is a lot easier generally, unless you're using industrial equipment, because you can cut the stems without having to bend down or go on your knees. If you were to coppice it, you cut it to the ground, just leaving a few inches of stem. That's easier for industrial machines, but for the average person in the garden, you'll have to bend down and cut it right at ground level, which is a lot more difficult. So we're cutting them to about this height, which is about 1 meter, maybe slightly lower than 1 meter. And we'll keep cutting them at that height. It just makes it a lot easier for managing. You can see some of these are quite big, so I will be using a secateurs when I can, but I'll probably be using some loppers as well because these are quite substantial. I might need to use a saw, I'm not sure. If you are using a saw, use a nice sharp pruning saw. You don't want to leave any ragged cuts. But the wood is very soft, so you can cut quite large branches even without a pruning saw generally. So when it comes to this, we want them all to grow at the top. So I'll use this one as an example of how I'll be cutting them all. I'll also be doing a time lapse, so you can watch me cutting along the whole length of this row of hybrid willows. So the ones that aren't right at the top of the stem, such as these ones here, I'm going to be cutting them right at the base where they join the stem, and what that will do is it will make it so that they're less likely to sprout. So I'll just cut them off here. A little bit tricky with one hand with the camera, so I'll be doing the rest without holding the camera, but you can see there I've cut it off quite close to the stem. These top ones I'm probably going to cut them pretty close to the stem as well, but these will resprout because they're at the top. The top of the shoot is always the I should say this top of the plant is where the most growth comes from. So you see again, side ones here, cut them right off at the edge, trying to leave nothing. These ones, I'll probably cut them about this thick, so you can see there's a few buds left on them. So cutting it there, looking around the side, you can see there's a bud here. You can see that little pointy bit there, that's the bud, that's where it will regrow from. There'll be some more buds under the bark that you probably can't see as well that will resprout, but just leaving a slight little bit, probably about 2 or 3 centimeters, will help that to resprout. Whereas cutting it right off at the stem here, you can see there's less material where you can put out new shoots. That will encourage it just to grow from the top, and then in following years we won't have all this growth at the bottom, and it'll make it a lot easier for cutting the plants off at the top. So that's the willow all now cut down. As you can see, it is quite a difference. It really feels a lot more open here. Also feels a lot windier. I don't know if that's because the winds just suddenly got up, or if the willow was actually providing a decent amount of shelter, but certainly it does feel a lot windier than it was about half an hour ago. You can see here quite a lot of willow material. Now this is quite useful if you want to make basketry or any kind of arts and crafts. You can also make willow fences out of these by weaving them, because willow is so incredibly flexible. I'll show you a piece down here. Willow is incredibly flexible material. You can curve it right round without snapping. You can even actually do spirals as well without snapping, so it's really useful for making weaving or baskets and things like that. As long as you do it fresh whilst it hasn't dried out, it's really flexible, not brittle at all. So I've cut these all to a similar height. I used a cut stick just to make sure that the height was the same along the whole row, so they're a lot more even now. Some of them might look a bit odd because I've also raised the height slightly as well, just to make it a bit easier for pruning in the future. Now in this section we have a willow arch, and I will actually be making another willow arch at the end here, so I'll show that at the end of the video. But I just wanted to show you the 3 that I thought seemed to be the longest. These have all grown in 1 year, and the biggest one appears to be this one. So you can see there. Now I'll get myself a measuring tape, I'll show you the diameter it's grown. You can see there, it's just one growth ring. There's not multiple growth ring. If there's anything that does look like rings, that will just be because some months it grew better than others. But that's 1 year's growth in that length. So I'll get a measuring tape now, show you how thick it managed to grow, and also how long this one actually is. So looking at the end of the trunk here, so it's about 2.5 centimeters, just over probably, in width. So that's about 1 inch, and I'll just now get the length of it. So I've laid out the measuring tape, and luckily my measuring tape is long enough, and it is actually slightly bigger than I was expecting. You can see it's slightly wavy, but it's quite straight, so it'll be quite an accurate measurement. If anything, it could be slightly longer than this. I'll try and pull it as straight as I can. We're looking here all the way from the end down there in 1 season, in just probably about 6 months, 7 months. It looks like it's about 4 meters 42 that it's grown. So that's 174 inches. I'll have to do a calculation, work out what that is in feet. I don't think I've got feet mentioned here. But anyway, 174 inches, 4 meters and 42 centimeters in just 1 year. And when I say 1 year, I mean 1 growing season, which is around April, May until about October, November. So amazing growth from these willows, and that's just 1 year. And every year these willows should grow more and more as the roots get more established. A lot of these, this is the first time we pollarded them, so I wasn't expecting them to grow that well, that quickly. And they were, because normally when you pollard something, it grows back up to the height it was originally, or sometimes slightly higher, or sometimes slightly lower, depending how hard the prune was. These actually probably doubled in height, so normally you'd expect the plant to get up to its original height in that 1 growing season, but this one actually surpassed that, which was quite surprising. So it'll be interesting to see next year how much they grow. As I say, 4 meters 42 centimeters, that's some pretty exceptional growth in 1 year. So the total height of this was probably about 5 meters, a bit over 5 meters, probably 5.20, but the actual growth in 1 year, in 1 season, was 4 meters and 42 centimeters. So I'm going to go ahead now and tie in these last two as an archway. Now when tying archway with willow, if you tie it in with string, it does help. You can do it without string, it looks much more nicer and neater. The other archway we have in the garden that I showed you previously is tied in without any string. Just the willow, using the willow is almost like twine to tie it in. This one, because it's a much wider arch, I'm going to be tying it in with string. You can also choose how many sticks you want to grow into the willow arch. I'm going to use several for this. So there's going to be about 3 or 4 plants going into this final willow arch. You could just go with 1 plant or 2 plants, it's up to you. The archway, what will happen is it will thicken up over the years, it'll make a solid structure, it won't fall apart, but it'll grow lots of straight growth off the top. And I'll put in an update video in a few months' time to show you how it looks when it starts to grow again, and you'll see it does look quite different with all the new growth coming up on top. It's also very popular for people to make willow structures out of willow. So what you do is you stick the willow in the ground, and because it roots so easily, it will start growing. You can then weave in that material, even in the first year that you use it as cuttings, because you can have cuttings up to 3-4 meters long, and they'll still take root and survive. And you can make big willow structures. So they're quite popular here in the UK, at least they were in the mid-2000s. So I'll go ahead now, try and tie this in. It might be a bit difficult, it's very windy at the moment, so I'll see how I get on. And I'll say I'll be using string for this one just because it's a wide gap and to be trying to fill with just without any string. My mother did actually tie this up previously without string and the winds blew it apart, so that's another reason I'm going to be using string today. That's it now tied in. I did actually have to get my mother to help me to hold it because I couldn't tie and hold it at the same time, but you can see it's nicely tied in now. It was quite difficult giving it the height because it's so wide and the branches weren't that long. It was quite difficult getting the height on it. The higher you do it, the less overlap you have, and the less overlap the harder it is to tie on. But it's tied on now. I might tweak it at some point because at the moment I'm not sure if I like it or not with the interesting kind of mismatch on the sides, so it's kind of nice to curve up there, and then this side looks a lot more organic. It's kind of opened up and coming through unusually. That kind of looks nice. I might leave it, I'm not sure. I could have it I could tie these ones in tighter, and tie these down together, maybe reduce how many I have, just have 2 or 3 so that it matches better on the side here. But in a way I kind of quite like how it looks like that. It shows that it is organic, it is a plant, and it kind of gives it a bit of character. So I might leave it like that. I'll secure it in a tiny bit more twine. The twine I've used is quite thin, weak twine. The reason for that is I will need to cut this off at some point because it will start cutting into the structure and damaging the plants. So keeping this twine quite weak, it means that I can easily cut it, and if I forget to cut it, it should rot off and break anyway. And I'll put a few more on because it is quite windy here. There's a chance it could break off, but as soon as these start to grow, which won't be too long, you can see there's already some leaves are starting to grow through. It is the middle of February, so it shouldn't be growing yet, but come April, May, it'll be growing nice and strong. What will happen is the stems will thicken up, lots of new shoots will come up, they'll grow vertically. We'll let them grow vertically over the summer. They'll thicken up the stems. When the stems thicken up, they'll actually set in that position so that even once the ties are taken off, they'll be solid and they'll keep that curved shape. Once you've had 1 growing season, possibly 2 growing seasons, it then keeps that shape and it doesn't spring back even if you untie it, so it'll keep a nice curved position. And then all the verticals, we'll let them grow over the summer, and at the end of the summer we'll just cut them back to the arch, so it'll keep the nice kind of arch shape to the plant. So that's it for now in this update. You can see, cut them all down. I'll need to organise these. Some of them I could use as cuttings, other ones for maybe making into a willow fence, or possibly just use for kindling, or we can always chip them and use them in the beds as well for mulch. So that's all from this update, and as I say, I'll give you guys an update on these willows in the middle of summer when they're starting to grow, and they'll probably be in regular updates of the general garden updates that I do for this garden here at my parents'.